Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Adrian.
Hello.
I'm sitting here with Adrian DiMatteo, a sound, meditation, and healing facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I look forward to participating in your workshop this evening, the House of More.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, for those catching it on video, you got a lot of your toys here, so good. A lot of weapons. I think, you know Yogi Res?
I don't, but he mentioned it to me as well.
Yeah, because the reason it came to mind and the reason Tyler mentioned as well is because when he came, he doesn't use flutes, it's the only one, but he uses a lot of these other stuff. So I think he called it weapons of mass awakening or something.
Yeah, I tend to leave the weapons part out of it myself in my cosmology, but they are definitely tools for peace.
What is it? There's a messianic prophecy. I think the swords will be beaten into plowshares or something.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of musical references in prophecy too about the trumpets coming and things of that nature. Right. The prophets were always accompanied by musicians in general, and in a lot of poignant moments, music has been there, for the people.
Yes, yeah, it's an important. It's very important.
Yeah, I think that's why we sing when we do the bar mitzvahs and things, because the Torah is a song, and the songs that are in there are exaltations of the sacred things in life, the holy parts of life. So it's just part of the tradition to sing and to give praise and to connect our hearts with something that is beyond our intellect, because the music and the instruments, these sounds can take us beyond our normal mind.
Right. There was someone here who we interviewed, I don't remember who said that, like you were saying, when prophets would go to prophesize, they'd have, someone with drums or other musical instruments, and they couldn't prophesize until those activated their prophetic, vision or whatever it was that they were accessing.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's an atmosphere for a state of mind, right? You're not going to necessarily enter into a romantic state of mind out in the middle of public. Like, you need to be in a place where you're connecting with your loved one in a certain way. And so for prophecy or for some other state, then we need to create an atmosphere with all of the senses, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the touch. All of that contributes to opening up that part of your consciousness to be able to enter into that space of concentration, of prayer, of receiving a message from your inner self.
Right. You know what I've noticed it the most is watching a movie on silent. And then you see how you just cannot create any feeling in the scene without the music.
Absolutely. Yeah, music is behind all of the advertisements. The people with the money, they know too that music is power. And, historically, there have been a lot of examples of music being used in military settings. They're using drums and horns and things to call formations of the army or to announce the arrival or whatever they need to do. So music is functional. It can be utilitarian like that, but it always comes with these other intangible emotional qualities.
Fascinating. You were mentioning before the podcast that you have a Hebrew name.
Yeah, Malak.
Malak.
Yeah,
that's
which
cool.
I understand as messenger.
Okay.
Can also be king, angel.
Yes.
Yeah, depending on the context. But the angels are messengers in a sense. They deliver, the will of Hashem. So. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Right. An angel as a messenger. Mm-hmm. Typically, when I hear it, the first word I think is an angel.
Yes.
But yes, I guess the literal translation is probably messenger. Mm. Why that name?
Well, when I first did my birthright trip to Israel, I wasn't given one at birth. And so they were trying to give me one, and they were like, what about this? What about that? What are the concepts that you feel resonant with? And, we were in the holy places, and they're trying to give me the name on the mountaintop and everything. And I'm like, no, it's not the name. I can't just take it just because, So eventually I encountered a meditation group, and when I was there, the person, and it's very interesting, he was just like a shamanic person, yeah? And in the middle of the night, he was like, Adrian, I was just talking to Abraham. In his meditation. And he's like, and he's saying that your name is Malak. And I was like, he doesn't know Hebrew. The guy doesn't know Hebrew. And I'm like, well, that's very strange, You know
what it meant?
I didn't know what it meant at that time. And so, but it resonated with me. I was just like, that feels really good. And then I later looked up what it meant. And, I've been doing a lot of Jewish learning to reactivate that part of myself, because through my mother, then the ancestry is there. But once I looked it up, I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. When I was a kid, when I was learning about the Greek history and stuff, we learned about Mercury, Hermes, which was like the messenger god with the winged sandals. And I always really resonated with that concept of the messenger. And then later, I also learned about in the Incan Empire, they had these people called chasquis who used to run by foot and carry messages throughout all of South America, Central America. So it's been a concept that's been following me. And as far as like music, poetry, writing, which are my main vocations, all of that is about delivering a message. So the deep study of like, what does it mean to be a messenger has been a huge part of my path.
Right. When you think of messenger, you can think of it as like a messenger of a letter, right? Like back in the day. It has that connotation as well, like delivered this message.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, the songs and the prayers are carrying some message for the people. So when we choose our messages, then we can apply that to just everyday life. What is the message that I bring to my family, my community, my friends, my coworkers? How am I delivering, the message?
Neat. How long ago was that you adopted the name?
It was about 8 years.
Neat.
Yeah.
Okay, and how is this this path of Jewish exploration going for you?
It's going great. It's interesting that after I was exploring music and for meditation specifically, because I went to the Eastman School of Music where I studied and received a degree in jazz guitar, music theory, and I was playing pop songs and stuff for weddings. But once I really started to explore spiritual music, the connection, especially through the birthright trip, opened me up a lot to just the deep sense of connection that I have with that part of the world and the people. And then the more that I read and uncovered, because then I began reading Torah and studying things and observing holidays with friends, the first person that ever invited me to do like a paid event in his home for like a private healing session of sound, he was a Hasidic person in, I think it was Crown Heights or Borough Park. And so I went over there, and that opened up a lot for me as far as opportunities. And since that time, I've done lots of group work with Hasidic people especially, but Jews from different walks of life. And I've been studying Kabbalistic principles and how they apply and relate. So it's been beautiful. I love the language of Hebrew as well. I wish that I could speak it. I'm working towards that. But it definitely has ancient power, and the knowledge of the tradition is just so comprehensive, and it's beautiful. So I have a lot of appreciation.
Okay, glad to have you as a member of the tribe.
Yeah.
I used the term spiritual music.
Yes.
Is that a quantifiable thing?
Honestly, I say spiritual music for lack of a better term. Any of the labels that I put on this stuff, it doesn't really describe what's happening. You have to feel it. You have to be present. It's an experience. And when you have that experience, then you know what that is, to feel connected to something transcendental. I think that life is spiritual. Everything should be imbued with this sense of depth and closeness to God, or whatever we want to say there. But spiritual is something we have to practice. If we have a disconnection from that, then we need to feel, okay, what is spiritual, what is not spiritual? But as we find that connection more and more, then we notice that everything we're experiencing all day, every day and night is because of Hashem and close to that process. So then that label may not be necessary anymore.
Well, maybe there's a way of saying that there is certain music that seems to activate that aspect of it, right? For example, I don't know, let's say a nigun, right? Or a ikaro, or a, I don't know, medicine music, any of these things,
Yes.
right? The Native American flute. They have very specific sounds that seem to activate something different than, say, I don't know, death metal music.
Sure. There's a few things to say about that. I mean, for one, the instruments themselves are often designed and created for the purpose, and they're made in a prayerful way, the same way that you would need to be in a certain state in order to write a rendition of the Torah or something. There's a person has to be capable of transmitting that. So from the inside, then there is a transmission of that state of consciousness that can make it sacred music. There's also songs and things which come from sacred languages, ancient languages such as Hebrew, or different indigenous languages that to them that's their sacred language, ancient. Those carry vibrations, and you think that some of these prayers have been recited by every generation for thousands of years, then they carry power. They have a magnetism, and there's like an inherited wisdom because the songs are also transmitting teachings. So how should we understand ourselves? How should we understand our relationships? How should we understand the nature of reality and Hashem? Then it's a teaching. So that can make it a sacred song, but keeping in mind that if somebody's listening to death metal music, they may be going through a deep and difficult process in their life, and that music can be very cathartic for them. And so for where they are in their process, it's still sacred because it's helping them process their emotions and find joy and beauty and love in life. Now, as you refine your taste in certain ways, you may move towards or away from different genres of music. But I personally don't place any judgment on genres or whether or not that is sacred to the person listening to it, because that's an inner knowledge they have to have.
Right. No, I get that. It just definitely evokes a different feeling, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and there's so many different moods to evoke. Like some music can be very fast. That's going to pick up your energy in a different way than music which is slow and lower volume and calming. Then we have songs like lullabies for children. We are not going to sing a super loud, fast, exciting song to try to put the baby to sleep.
Sure.
So it's very natural, you know, and there's rhythms that are close to the heart rate or rhythms which help the brain to kind of get into the deep sleep states and things like that. And there's been research on sound vibration and brain waves and things like that.
Yeah. Okay, so the primary way you kind of earn your living, right, so to speak, just as a way to understand what you do, is leading workshops like you do tonight?
Yes.
Anything
So
else?
I facilitate spaces for meditation and healing, and those are group events, sometimes public, and sometimes I'm brought privately to people's homes or other venues. I also lead retreats of different lengths and different types. The most popular one that I've been doing is the Sound Healer Training Program, which is 20 hours, and that takes place over one evening and 2 full days. So there's a sound bath or a sound meditation, and then there's a full day of training where you learn about the instruments, how to use them, principles, theories, philosophies behind all of this, so you can understand, you know, intellectually, emotionally, physically, have an experience of it to integrate that. So I make my living through those things, and also direct private instruction online mostly, sometimes in person, but I travel, and so it's been more practical to teach online, especially since the pandemic.
Got you. So I'm not sure it's my imagination, but it seems to me like some of these instruments, one doesn't have to necessarily be musical to play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, because sound and music are two different concepts, right? The cell phone rings, it makes a sound. That sound is functional, and it has a benefit. It lets you know that something's happening, you need to pick it up. So sound and music don't occupy exactly the same place. Music is limited. Sound includes music, but it includes a bunch of other stuff too. So sound meditation may often include the sound of waterfalls, ocean waves, birds, the wind, because these natural sounds can help calm people down and bring them back in touch with nature. So that's not exactly a musical concept. And the instruments make beautiful sounds, but it's still free from a lot of the dogmas that can surround musical genres. You're like, oh, you got to have these keys, these notes, these chords. There's a lot of theories. Yeah, but it's free from that because it's much more about your state of consciousness as you play the instruments, what you're practicing. Simple meditations. You can chant a letter, you can chant a word, you can chant the Shema or something in conjunction with a singing bowl or a Shruti box or one of these other instruments. And that can just deepen your connection on that level. But it's still not music in the sense that we normally think of it.
Right. And it's also, I mean, you couldn't teach someone to play guitar in 20 hours. There's very little that they would know about it.
Of course, yeah.
But if we're talking about some of these, like a sound, what do you call it, a sound healing facilitator workshop?
Yeah, sound healer training.
Or training, yeah.
Yeah.
So that can be learned in that period of time?
So a lot of these instruments, you just don't need much training to learn how to make a sound out of them that sounds good. You can pick up a harmonica and just blow into it, and it's going to sound good. Is it okay for me to just
Yeah,
pick
sure.
it
I
up?
was going to ask you if you wanted to demonstrate.
I mean, for instance, I can just, all I need to do is breathe in and out of the harmonica. So just playing a simple instrument like this, it makes a beautiful harmonious sound, and it connects you with your breath. And just doing that is already a great practice. The other instruments, a shaker, you don't have to learn much to know how to shake it around. There are singing bowls. Usually I have a mallet, but I just strike it, and it's going to make a sound. I can listen to the length of the sound, breathing in, breathing out, letting the whole sound dissipate. Because when I strike this once, it might last for a minute, and that can already help you to ground. So chimes, shakers, bells, simple tools that don't require a lot of explanation, but can help you get in that zone.
Is that part of your mission to make it accessible?
Yes, absolutely. I want people to know that this is something that does not belong to musicians. It doesn't belong to artists or people who define themselves as creatives. Music and sound are fundamentally human. It's just something all of us connect to. And I think the example of the lullabies from birth show how deep music is in our process. The heartbeat is a rhythm. Mm-hmm. So connecting with these tools is safe, non-invasive, no side effects from pharmaceutical medicines. You don't need any crazy stuff. You can just sit down with some instruments and get yourself into the sound. And I make that accessible to people through providing resources, trainings, and I also try to make those things affordable so that people are not boxed out of access just because, oh, it's too expensive, I can't go on a retreat.
Right. How about the Native American flute? Is that, or whatever these flutes are?
Yes.
That takes a little more skill.
A little bit more, but I can teach people the basics of learning one of these flutes in about an hour.
Really?
So I can show you a very brief example if you want.
Sure.
Sure, I move this a little bit. Use this one. Oh, no. So this flute has 5 holes. That's why it's called a pentatonic flute. 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's a 5th one down here. There's a hole where the sound kind of comes out here, and one more in the back that I blow into. So first, to make a sound on it, all I have to do is blow into it.
It's a nice sound.
And it already sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Then all you got to do is add one finger, just the pad of your finger on the first hole. And then release it. And then they just go down. 5 fingers, that's all you need. And if you can learn to just move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and back up.
It's got to be in some order like that?
There's an order to start with to keep it simple. So just going right from the top to the bottom, and from the bottom to the top with 5 fingers. All I need to do is breathe in. And it's already a melody. Just taking 2 or 3 fingers, you can make a lot of different ones.
Cool, yeah. It feels accessible with the way you do it. I like it.
Yeah,
So-
yes. Simpler than it seems,
pull
but
that
to
a little
become a
closer.
oh yeah. You there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's simpler than it seems, but to become a master of anything, obviously there's so much growth space within that.
Of course.
And really with this type of music, you're focused more on like where you at in your mind inside while you're playing it. So in the Peruvian Andes, there's a tradition and there's a term called munai. And the munai is like the breath or the power, the force of love, the energy of love. And if you don't play the flute with that breath full of love, then you're not playing a healing flute. You may be playing music, but it's lacking this other dimension. So that's the invisible part, that a person has to be doing that inside for the music to reach that transcendental place.
Understood. So you've transitioned your musical career pretty much completely to spiritual music, sacred music, healing music.
Most of the work that I do now, yes, is related to that. People who are interested in self-development and healing. But I still love to play jazz and blues and rock. I have original songs that I write, which some people might not consider would be in the genre of meditation or healing music.
Right.
Songs with the guitar that I have written that have words in English and are just telling the stories of what it means to be human. Those are more like folk songs, they don't fall in the genre of folk, but they are songs about the human experience. So I wouldn't limit myself.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
But how did this pivot to healing music come about?
Yeah, well, about 8 years ago, when I relocated from Qatar, where I was working at the St. Regis Hotel in Doha, and then
What's a nice Jewish kid doing in Qatar?
Hashem sends us some places. Sometimes we don't know how we end up there.
Right.
But we learn what we need to learn, and I got to Boston after that. I started a prog rock band, and I was playing
A what?
Progressive rock band,
Okay.
like Yes, King Crimson, like this kind of stuff. 2 guitars, drums, bass, more hard rock. And then I had met a person in my travels before when I was living in France, and I knew that she was from this area. I asked her, "Can you put me in touch with some people? I'm new. I'm trying to just, meet a group of people." She sent me somewhere, and there was a sound meditation, and it was my first encounter with indigenous music and healing music as an idea. Even though I got a degree in music, they never bring that up. They don't talk about it because it's not part of the model of the typical conservatory education. So then I was like, wow, this environment feels so supportive. People are listening with their whole soul. It's like they're not just, I'm on stage and it's a concert or a dance party and they want pop songs to get them moving.
Right.
So that was the, like, I want to be in this vibration more and more and understand what's happening. And I was just thirsty for knowledge, so I kept committing to as many experiences that brought me in that direction as possible. And that's the path I've been on.
Right. You're saying there's kind of an immersive quality to the listening of that.
Yes.
Versus going to a concert and it may be in the background, or you're at a bar mitzvah, maybe in the background. And sure, it may be dancing, but the music is still somewhat in the.
Yeah, I actually started an organization called Interactive Music. It's part of the Sonic Institute, and we provide events which are conscious listening experiences. And the idea there is that typically when you have a band on stage and an audience, the roles that the person puts themselves in is limited. It's like, okay, they're the performer, I'm the audience. These experiences are much more co-creations where the person is responsible for an inner process. You're meditating, you're praying, you're trying to access your inner self and kind of zoom in from all of the external stuff that people tend to be very focused on. It's not about getting drunk and partying and whatever. There's an intention. So when we co-create that, the experience becomes, I think, much more inclusive of the soul.
Right. So the Sonic Institute does what?
The Sonic Institute provides training.
This is the institute you founded, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Sonic Institute provides trainings and resources for people to learn about and connect with music and sound as tools for meditation and healing. So that comes in the form of books, recorded music, retreats, online lessons, and other community outreach efforts to preserve traditional knowledge or to bring music and meditation to different settings like hospitals, children's centers, prisons, and different places, addiction recovery centers.
Got it. So as part of those efforts, are you continuously learning about new types of music? They say they have Tibetan bowls and Native American flutes. They have, in South America, they have all sorts of, some of these shakers or whatever else it is.
Yes.
They come from.
Yeah.
So is that part of your work also, to continue to explore and find new things about?
Yeah, I'm always learning. Actually, just before I came on this trip down to Miami, I received a copy of Ted Gioia's Healing Songs in the mail. And it's a book where he has written about healing traditions of music and sound from all over the world. These are things which are shared by all cultures. It's not something that belongs to a specific group. Everyone, everywhere you go, traditionally speaking, has music, chanting, prayer.
Right. Everyone just learns different things about it.
Yeah, or they have different materials in their environment which allow them to create instruments particular to that environment.
Right.
So there are leaves.
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah.
This is an instrument for the people of the Amazon jungle. And they may.
I've sat in many ayahuasca ceremonies with that sound over my head.
And then this is an instrument made out of like goat snails and goat's nails, I believe, like the trimmings of the nails of a goat, and then they clang together like this. There can be instruments, again, like the rattle, where there are seeds inside. Obviously, we're familiar with the shofar, and all of them, they speak to the environment. The reason that the flute is one of the most ancient instruments is because, and they say it was at least 40,000 years old, but just the wind blowing by a riverbed, rustling the sound of the bamboo or the leaves, and then hearing the tones, because you blow into it and it's already singing a note, it's considered to be one of the most ancient instruments. So the voice, the flute, the drum, and the rattle, the leaves, these are very primal. And then other instruments made out of metal and more complex things like the guitar required more engineering. They came later.
Right. Very neat. And do you continue to learn new things about it. I sat with Dan Brule. Dan Brule. So he calls himself, I don't know, a student of the breath, or maybe at this point a master of the breath. And he said if he heard there was someone that knew something about the breath, wherever he had the China, Japan, the Amazon, he's like, if there's something to learn, then he wanted to learn what they had to say. Just over the years, he amassed tons of knowledge from many different traditions that, just learned something about this this tool of ours, breathing.
Yeah, I continue to learn constantly, and I'm fortunate that I've been able to encounter a lot of traditional people through pilgrimages and through them coming to visit. New York City is a place that brings a lot of people from different walks of life, and so I've encountered the African tradition from different tribal groups. I've encountered Mayans from Guatemala and Huichol people from Mexico and different shamanic groups from the Amazon. And so those encounters always get me in touch with other possibilities. I learn what I can when I have those opportunities to be around people, whether just through listening or through directly asking questions. I read online what information is available, although that's rarely a good substitute for direct experiential transmission. I've done extensive study with Tibetans as well, learning about mantra recitation and how that, is practiced. The people of India, the Ayurvedic medicine is a great system that includes mantra recitation as part of healing procedures. So those are forms of learning, reading, watching videos. Sometimes I just go online and I say, what is the folk music of Argentina sound like? And I look it up and I want to hear what were they listening to 100 years ago in Argentina or in some other country, and learning about folk traditions, especially for the guitar, because the guitar is one of these instruments that's made it all over the world. So I'm interested in flamenco, I'm interested in jazz, I'm interested in bossa nova, I'm interested in rock and roll, blues, just, I'm hungry for knowledge.
Around the subject.
Yeah.
So recently I've been coming across in different workshops, people talking about frequencies or megahertz. Can you give us an explanation that doesn't sound overwhelming?
Sure. So hertz is just the unit of measurement we use to say how many times in 1 second does something vibrate. So when we tune an instrument to like A440, because there's an international standard of tuning that was established by an organization, they're, the same people that are responsible for how long is a foot, how long is a second, like the record of that has to be kept. So the tuning of A440 just means that anything that vibrates 440 times in 1 second is going to create that note. And then all of the different frequencies are just different speeds of vibration. That's basically what that means. But we want to understand vibration because there's light and there's sound. Those are the two main types of vibration we're used to thinking about, right? Light waves and sound waves. So the main difference, and this might sound a little technical, I'm trying to keep it real basic, but light waves are made of photons, yeah? And the light is the particles. It's made of particles that are traveling through space and time. Sound waves require a particle field to vibrate. So when you have air, it's full of molecules, and the sound vibrations travel through the air only because those particles are there to bounce against each other. And that creates waves of movement from the particles through space. And that touches our ears, which vibrate the eardrum. And then there's a whole process for how mechanical pressure waves from sound get converted into like neuroelectric signals that we interpret and give meaning to that. So there's the brain part, which is electric in a sense, and then there's the sound part, which is the mechanical, physical waves that are moving through space. They can move through air, water, physical solids. So an example of that, when you put a glass on the table, if a truck drives by outside, the glass will vibrate.
Right.
That's what happens inside of you when you feel the sound. Maybe you've stood near a big bass speaker. Your whole body resonates and shakes because those sound waves are moving the particles and they're passing through your physical body. So that's one of the main ways that this technology does work, scientifically speaking. Those vibrations are like jiggling all your blood cells and your white blood cells and touching everything, your organs, and that can stimulate, for instance, oxygen to be accepted into the body and uptaken. The brain can be altered by that, and just you name it. There's a lot of effects.
Understood. So within these frequencies, so everything is playing at some frequency.
Yes, everything. Every cell in your body, every atom in your body vibrates. And because of that, it produces both light and sound. It produces phonons and it produces photons. But the phonons, that's the sound measurement, it's really a measurement of heat energy. So because it vibrates, it creates heat. And then we also call that sound. Our ears can only hear a certain range of sound. Most of the universe is full of other sounds. Louder, higher, quieter,
Like a dog
lower.
whistle or something, which...
Like a dog whistle, yeah. Certain animals, like bats, they communicate in ultrasound. They make these high-pitched clicks that we can't really hear. And those clicks bounce off of the walls. They hear the bounce back of the click, and they make a mental map of the space that they're in. So they're blind, but they see with sound. They can map space. And that's how we use sonar. When the boats send signals of sound waves under the ocean, the length of time that it takes for them to bounce back give us a map of the distance, because sound travels at a certain speed through air, through water, through different substances. And interestingly, it travels faster through solids than it does through liquid. And liquid is, like water, is about 5 times faster than through air. So sound travels in all those forms.
Right, that makes sense.
Because you can hear under a pool if somebody's...
Yeah, something, I hear something like music playing under a pool, you can hear really well.
Exactly.
Very cool. So what do these frequencies have to do with healing? Why the megahertz and the frequencies, what does it have to do with? Because you're hearing about it all the time, and recently I'm hearing about it all the time.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to look at that. I think for me, healing is transcendental to the physical part. So yes, we have physical bodies, we got to heal that. If we get stuck there, the whole conversation is going to be a little bit trapped in like, well, which frequency for which organ and whatever. But the thing is, the human being is much more complex than that. We have mental, emotional, and physical properties, all of which are interdependent with each other. And so a person may need a healing, but we know already about the placebo effect. You just tell them, this is going to help you, and then it helps them because they believe that. And that is a huge key to healing. So on one level, there is a faith that's involved. But it goes way beyond that because of the physical attributes that I've already mentioned. Now, low frequencies have bigger wavelengths. That means that they can pass around bigger objects. If you have like a speaker set up on your desk and you put a book or a plant in front of it, it blocks a lot of the sound and it doesn't sound good. So you need to make sure that those speakers aren't blocked by anything. However, a subwoofer, which produces the big, deep, low frequencies, you can put it anywhere in the room and it won't be blocked by objects because the waves that come off of that are bigger than a human body, bigger than a table, bigger than those things. So those low frequencies have a more visceral penetration quality that you really feel them, like a drum, deep drum.
The gong,
didgeridoos, low tones. And then, so that can be really good for helping with digestion, heart, the throat, the pineal gland, activation of the brain, because you're going to feel them really strong and they're going to definitely have an effect on you from constant exposure.
I heard there's like sounds connected to chakras, like there's different parts of the body get connected to different sounds.
Yeah, the concept of the chakra system is very deep and vast. And I
didn't mean to necessarily the chakra system, more in terms of the like areas of the body.
Right. Well, that's why I wanted to clarify, because a lot of people do connect chakras with body parts. And although there are associations, the chakra as a concept is rooted in the soul. It's much more like a sefirot in that sense. It's not something that is physical. However, it is reflected in the physical. So when we understand the way that sounds reach us, let's say in our heart, if we're talking about the heart chakra, or how it reaches us in our visions or our throats, if we feel issues around self-expression, because a lot of the work that I do is about healing one's relationship to self-expression. A lot of people don't feel good singing or talking in public. Mm-hmm. They have different kinds of insecurities. And whenever you start to express yourself through music, through art, anything, then you're going to have to confront the emotions and the blockages you may have about I'm good enough, or someone else is better than me, or I'm not meant to do this. In order to transcend that you can connect, then the different frequencies will be experienced differently depending on how the person perceives the experience that they're having. So for one person, it may be a highly visionary experience. In the sound baths, I have that. People are like, I was having visions and colors and seeing stuff. And then another person is like, I just felt really good in my body. I felt really calm. My emotions were very peaceful. So they're having a more emotional experience. Right. And other people may say, I experienced pain relief from this particular condition. I've had people say that their headache went away from the flutes. I've had people have stomach aches go away from the drums. So the sounds can reach all these levels, and the frequencies are correlated, but it's not like a one-to-one. I don't just subscribe to like, this is the frequency for that chakra or something. I think it's an oversimplification.
Understood. You've kind of made this your mission, right? Music.
Yeah, or it's naturally just unfolded in my life, because I was 11 when I wanted to learn guitar. I don't know how much of a choice I really made. It's like I heard it, I liked it, I was curious. I said, hey, I want to learn guitar. Next thing I know, I'm going to college for guitar. I made a series of choices along the way, but I also had a certain destiny of encounters that opened this up. And so I'm a little bit like, I don't see any other options because I love it so much and it's unfolding for me naturally. I make decisions towards it, but at the same time, it's really like an unfolding of something really mysterious.
I hear that. Not everyone takes the detour into purpose with it that you have. Meaning, someone could say, hey, it's tons of fun and enjoyable, and I love, I don't know, playing for a room and everyone's excited, but that's not the same as that detour into healing and growth and, I don't know, someone struggling with self-expression and now they're healed. It's a little bit different twist.
Yeah, well, these practices have helped me to become a healthier, happier person. And that is the process of self-realization. And the more that you do self-realization work and you find yourself better, feeling better, thinking more positively.
The more you want to share that?
You want to share that. Yeah, and you first, the tendency is to want it for your friends and family because they're the ones that are close to you. You love them.
Right.
You remember how grateful you are for your mom and dad, your brothers and sisters, the animals and plants, the stars and the moon. The next thing you know is you want that for everyone because you know that we're all
your friends and
interdependent.
family don't listen anyway.
Those are the hardest ones to get in the door for sure.
Right. See, if I may as well share it with the rest of the world, and hopefully one of them will share it with a friend or family.
Yeah, but after all these years, my family has come around a lot more to this, and I've been seeing big changes in them. I think because in part of the changes in myself.
Right.
We're all connected. When we create a space in our own spirit, others can then move into that space, and I think that creates breathing room. So in our society, we just all could create a little more breathing room for each other to exist, without judgment, without having to, harm each other in the various ways that we are.
Got it. And do you see this as a mission beyond just the people you're touching, meaning something global that this can touch on that would change if, I don't know, enough of this information was adopted or enough people jumped on board with having an assortment of this and the confidence to play it?
Yeah, well, it's been exciting to release my first book, Elements of Sound, a full spectrum exploration of sound and consciousness. It's reaching around the world already. Somebody bought it in England and Holland. So the ideas are getting out there. And I really believe that if one person can be touched in the right way by something, that they can create a whole movement out of that. So I'm not attached to whether or not it's me directly and the work I'm doing with people that's going to make these changes. But I've already graduated hundreds of people from my courses, and I've taught many people music, and they're all touching people in their lives and communities. So by extension, I'm reaching thousands of people, and those thousands of people are reaching thousands more. So even an individual is touching ultimately millions and billions of lives when you consider the transgenerational inheritance of the wisdom. So yeah, I believe that my work has an impact, and I believe that the people who are impacted by it have an impact.
The people who are impacted by it.
The people who are impacted by my
then
work
go on to have an impact.
then
right.
go on to have an impact.
Yes, the influence to become influencers. Got it. Have you kind of explored the Jewish aspects of music? I know in the temple it was a very big deal, right? The Levium playing music a lot.
Yes.
What type of music have you explored any of that? Have you been able to?
Well, from what we were discussing before, there's certain things that I've been able to explore up to this point. One is that in my mind, the Torah is a song. The whole thing is melodic, and it's chanted. Yeah, it's read with a melody. When I read my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, I was taught a certain, sing song, and it was fairly important. I mean, there's a lot of I've seen commentaries kind of explain a word and say you can only truly understand its meaning if you understood the melody that accompanied it and things like that. I've come across not a ton of that, but enough to suggest it's very meaningful. The specific melody. Yeah. Around the Torah. There's that. There's also every consonant and vowel has a different physiological property. To make, let's say the word amen. Right. Ah first is the opening. It's like the beginning of creation. When Hashem opened the consciousness into the manifestation.
Like the Om?
The Om, it's related, yes. That's why we find similar sounds all over the world. But Amen, then the Ah comes out, and the M is an internalization. It moves out and it moves in, just like the giving and the receiving principles. And then of course, the letters of the word are also have their meanings. And so you can meditate on what is the meaning of these letters, what is the physical sensation of producing the sound, which chambers of the body are activated. Because when you make a T or a N, Ah, these are all concentrating the vibrations in different parts of your body. So you can stimulate your brain, you can stimulate your heart, you can, like the word ahava is a beautiful heart-opening word. All of the natural sounds we make, sighing, yawning, crying, and laughing, ha ha ha. So the heart, always the air passes through the heart in certain vowels and syllables and things. So there's that dimension of the power of the language, right? But the other things about the shofar and like that whole tradition and why the blasts are made the way that they're made. I've even seen a Kabbalistic artist out of Sfat who takes recordings of a shofar and he makes images of them, and then he colors the images, and they're super beautiful translations of the sound of the shofar into visual art. So the relationship between light and sound. And then, as we mentioned, the prophetic aspects and the needing to create an atmosphere, a sound, a tonality where the voice can be heard. Then that's another very deep practice. A lot of this stuff is not necessarily explicitly stated in the texts, but it's passed more through the rabbinical side and through the Talmud and things. Then there's more exploration of these concepts.
God, how, I guess it is a weird way to phrase the question, but how deep a capacity for healing to understand music to have? In other words, just, of course you're going to say a lot, I know that, but in other words, if you or someone you knew, or not you, not a good example, if someone you knew, cared about, was really sick, would you feel comfortable recommending like this? Hey, I'm going to, hours of sound meditation as a way to heal?
Yeah, when I work with people, I'm always careful to say, I'm not a doctor, clinically speaking, so please follow the advice of the medical world. If you have heart conditions and things, I am not coming between, and I don't have any opposition to what may be called Western medicine, but there, as a modality in conjunction with other healing modalities, sound is excellent, and it's highly unlikely that it will cause damage, and it's more than likely that it will benefit you in terms of relaxation, changing the way that you're thinking. It's almost a neuro-linguistic reprogramming process. So there's a psychological component, there's an emotional component there. So going to sound baths, going to learn instruments, and bringing musical practice into your life, in pretty much 100% of the cases, it's gonna bring benefit. And I've worked with people with autism, people with schizophrenia who have been on antipsychotic medications for their whole lives, and it's brought immediate, tangible benefit in all those environments: schools, hospitals, prisons, different environments where, and if you just Google around or read any of the scientific journals about, if you just type music therapy, Alzheimer's, music therapy, depression, music therapy, hypertension, there are studies showing that music has been proven beneficial in virtually any medical condition you can imagine. But it's a matter of the right attitude and the right practice. Not every type is going to be the best for everyone, but there needs to be a receptivity to it in the first place.
Understood. As far as sound healers, facilitators, if someone listening is intrigued by that, which I imagine some people would, because even the few minutes you demonstrated what you did, it felt accessible to me. Like, I'm not a musician, I can barely keep a tune, but hey, I can do that. I can probably play the flute. Like.
Yeah, maybe we could get you to do it right now just to prove it.
We'll do an offline first.
All right.
But
next time you come on, you're going to play the flute for the people.
That'd be cool. Yeah, that'd be cool. So, where was I going with that question?
Different people getting involved. They might be interested in getting involved.
Like just in terms of it being accessible, but I forgot. You distracted me with the thought of music. Maybe we should go there, if that's the
No, it might have been about like if a person's listening to this and they're just hearing it for the first time and they might want to get interested, like how
Okay,
should,
so go with that.
yeah.
Go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if a person is intrigued by these concepts, obviously I can recommend my book to learn more about the possibilities. It's a vast world. And just get curious about it. You can even get around on YouTube and just say sound meditation, healing music, sound baths, start to look into it and see what's out there. There's so many approaches to this work, and there are some things that are very common today with the practitioners. Some of the most common things you'll find are crystal bowls, these metal singing bowls,
Right.
gongs, tuning forks. Those are kind of the classic sound healing instruments, right? But we want to understand that sound healing is much more ancient than those things. And so where can you get started is just either if an instrument looks interesting to you, buy one, try it. Get your hands on a drum, get your hands on a flute. We have them, and they're all over the place, different types. Find yourself a teacher who can guide you into music. Learning a language is really good for the brain. Learning music is just like learning a language. And actually, I'll mention that processing music by playing it involves more parts of the brain simultaneously than pretty much any other activity. So it involves memory center, motor skills, emotional processing, linguistic processing. And so it creates neural formations that are great for people with Alzheimer's because there's a degradation of those pathways. And this is like a defibrillator for the brain. It stimulates all that. So don't feel overwhelmed by how vast the world is. Follow your heart, follow your intuition. Like, I want to sing. I'm not singing. Maybe someone can help me. Or I can just start to do it. Or I'm really interested in the flute. I love how that sounds. Give yourself permission, like, yes, I can learn that. It's not rocket science. Maybe I pursue somebody who knows about the flutes. I find one, I buy one, and I take some lessons.
So if being a musician is not a necessary component, at least for the basics of it, understanding that someone, can go, becoming a master at something is never ending, then what are the other maybe characteristics or skills or talents that do go into someone being good at this?
Memory is one of the main things that gets strengthened through music learning because you are learning new stuff that you have to integrate.
Right.
Music theory, concepts, physical stuff. There's a muscle memory involved with every instrument. You're training it. It's nice because if you think about something like yoga, right? People who start out, they're like, I don't know how to put my body in that shape, or this doesn't feel natural. After you take some lessons, you're training your body to be more flexible. You're supposed to also be training your emotions and your mind to be more flexible. But from the physical perspective, your fingers are able to do a lot that we don't do on a daily basis.
Right.
So you're going to be training more autonomy and connection between your mind and your body. A lot of people in our culture are experiencing big disconnections from their body. And so the music is great because it helps you get connected with your mind, your emotions, and your body all at the same time. So other skills, I would say just being open to learning. You have to be willing to feel like a fool. Like, oh, I don't know anything. I'm not good at this.
Right.
A lot of people laugh at themselves and say sorry, like when they make mistakes. But that's the learning process. So we have to kind of go into our child self when we learn music because, yeah, we have to admit, I don't know the first thing about it. We like to pretend that we're experts and we're good at things, and it can be hard to become humble. Like, let me start over from square one, not knowing anything about a topic, and like allow that child learning spirit to be there.
Understood. Anything I didn't ask you that I should have? Any topic you want to cover that we didn't go to?
I would just like to mention that if you want to listen to some of the music that I've made to get a connection to music for sound and meditation, I have an album called While You Are Awake. It's on all major platforms. And also my book, Elements of Sound, a full spectrum exploration of sound and consciousness. It's on Amazon. You can learn about all this stuff through my organization, sonicinstitute.com. I'm sure we're going to provide links for everything for you.
Yeah.
But just, I want you guys to know that this is more accessible than it may seem. It's more ancient and fundamentally human than you may understand. And it's also something which is really a shared aspect of all of humanity. And so I think it's a great tool for bringing peace, healing, and understanding to a lot of the situations that we're facing. But it starts from the inside out, so take it on as a personal practice for personal development. I don't recommend getting into it from the idea that, like, I'm going to be a sound healer and do events and make money, and it's really cool, and I like that. It's got to be coming from the heart of self-realization and then see how that unfolds. I wouldn't be too eager to just Think of it as a business. Although spirituality and business have overlaps, for me, that's a point where this work gets degraded a lot in our culture, and we just make it another commercialization strategy.
Right. No, I hear that. I know I know of a couple people at the House of Mormon floating around, but one in particular who he's just naturally gravitating to it, like buying some bowls and shakers and just kind of enjoying it. But I'm sure he'll love to hear this podcast and what you're doing, just to see how he can explore that further. Like for some people, it's like you said, you benefit in some way and then you want to share it.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I've heard the flute playing a bunch of times, and it sounds amazing. I'm like, wow, this guy must have spent 20 years learning, right? Just the same thing I would think about someone playing guitar, and it sounded amazing. It didn't feel quite accessible, which is what I'm very excited about this conversation. So I see certain people gravitating towards it, or gravitating towards, hey, I've benefited from being in a healing environment. I'd love to create those for others. What else can I do? And this is neat that it's like that. Your book explores what? What was the purpose of the book?
The book has a couple sections. Mainly, the first section is very much into the esoteric, metaphysical aspects of sound itself, our consciousness, how sound relates to the process of experiencing life and the nature of the universe. There's another portion of it which is associating sounds more with the elements in nature and how does sound connect to our physical, more tangible lives.
Right.
And then there's a last section which is introductory teachings about music theory for non-musicians and musicians, just to understand some of the basics, like what are notes, what are chords, what are scales, terms we might have heard before from musicians, but we don't really know what they mean. And I'm trying to make that information more accessible to everybody so that you can listen to music and sound with more understanding of the basic elements. What are the elements? Volume, speed, instrumentation, things like that. So the book attempts to give an exposition, just showing you the doorway in to a lot of different possible avenues, scientifically, spiritually, medically, and theoretically.
Nice. It came out recently.
Yeah, it just came out really at the beginning of this year. It's been a work in progress. I wrote it during the pandemic. It's very much like my pandemic baby, and I'm happy to be giving birth to it.
I have one of those, yeah.
Yeah. So it's fresh off the press.
Neat. Any questions on the other side? Anything else you want to explore that you want to go
Well,
to?
I would just, I would offer and ask maybe the work that you do, like this podcast, is sound healing.
In what sense?
Because people listen to it, and it brings them understanding and peace, and it changes the way that they feel, and it changes the way that they behave, hopefully, because they integrate what you're saying. You're transmitting your voice. People like to hear the tone of your voice, the volume of your voice, the pacing of your ideas, the questions that you ask, the way that you're using your mind. So in my mind, that is sound healing.
Right, I hear you. Okay.
But this is the stretch where some people are like, wait, how we get there?
Yeah.
But our voices are sound. And then our thoughts are also sound. We're hearing ourselves talking to ourselves. That's not sound with the physical properties that we're normally thinking. It's moved into a very elevated spiritual plane of what are those energies. But to me, this is an aspect of sound. And in many of the cultures, silent recitation is considered the highest form of recitation. That's why in the Shema, there is the silent portion of the recitation, because it's supposed that, let's say, the angels are saying it. So we need to be listening and accepting that there is a voice beyond what we hear. And so for me, it might seem like a stretch, but it's as simple as saying that the voice is sound and sound is carrying. So you're trying to bring healing to people through your voice.
Right. What I will say is that a very necessary component of my own healing journey was being comfortable with my own self-expression, like that did not come naturally to me at all. And recently, where was it? It's actually funny because, so I have a friend who we kind of got to know each other when we were both like beginning on our medicine journeys. And he spent hours learning to play the flute, drums, singing in ceremony and everything else. And he once said to me as a joke, like, Eli, I'm going to sing with you in ceremony once. And I was like, no, I'm never, like, not for me. And in the summer, we were in a sweat lodge together. and I don't know, just something about like the heat and the darkness, and possibly something I consumed before going in, like brought me like absolutely to my knees. Like I don't want to like full ego death, but it just completely humbling. I was like, wow, this is like, it was tremendous. I mean, just lying in the mud, because in the sweat lodge, you're on the earth. Between the sweat and the lower you get, the better you can breathe. So I'm like lying there covered in dirt, completely wet. And then at some point in time, I'm like, yeah, maybe I could sing a song. So I turned to him, he was there with me, and I was like, hey, what about I said, if I sing, you'll sing with me. And that was the first time I did in ceremony, and since then I've done it a number of times. And there's something about it that feels freeing. I don't have a better word. And I don't have a good voice. I can barely keep a tune. It's nothing to do with that.
Listen to those judgments.
What?
I don't have a good voice. Just
right, yeah.
That perception that we have of ourselves. But you have a great voice. Thousands of people like to listen to it. And singing and talking may have some differences, but there's an African proverb that says, if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing.
I like that.
So maybe it's not such a bad voice.
Right, I'm not selling out stadiums anytime soon. But within a ceremony, I'll always, if given the opportunity, sing a song. Like in that space, there's something beautiful. And I noticed it a lot with, the different like Native American tribes. I've been sitting in, whether it's sweat lodges or peyote ceremonies or other stuff where there'll be a lot of singing by them. And they don't have the greatest voices, but when I say greatest voices, because I'll accept your correction, they don't have what would be traditionally considered a beautiful voice or an amazing voice. But something tremendous is added into the ceremony when they start singing or drumming or shaking the rattle or, whatever it is. Like there's a noticeable difference in the spaces I'm able to go into once they do what they're doing, singing, drumming, rattling, whatever it is. And that's been neat to see in others and then see in myself, hey, it's possible I can do that.
Yeah, I think that element of participation also brings a depth to it. Like when you're just observing a prayer, like, oh, what are these people doing and how's it? No, the idea of all of the holidays is to become involved in that prayer, to recite things, and then that participation puts you in a direct, close communion with something because you're giving, you're offering what is inside of you to the others. And that is the moment where we stop being so self-absorbed, like my healing and what I need, and we're receiving, and we switch gears into the giving. And when we are in that, we're giving and receiving at the same time because we receive the energy to do that and we give it. So it's really uplifting to everybody when we join together in prayer. I mean, when you feel that when there's
100%.
20 guys singing together, it's like, wow. And then add some women too, and then we got everybody in the family,
Right. Even if none of them have a particularly compelling voice. Right. Together, there's something beautiful and amazing.
I mean, a good example I like to give is Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan has a voice that a lot of people might traditionally say it's not a good voice. It's gravelly. It's kind of all over the place, sometimes nasally, right? But people love his voice. And there's lots of examples I can give. Who are we to judge like a beautiful or a not beautiful? Because the person has poetry, the person has soul, the person is conveying something which is touching people. And they may relate to it even more because they're like, hey, I could sound like that. Like, I'm not going to sound like Christina Aguilera or Michael Jackson, but I could sound kind of like maybe Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix or Bob Marley or something. I don't know. People whose voices are a little bit more maybe down to earth or we can feel how they're doing that. It's not so unattainable.
Right, accessible.
Yeah, because people are born, some people are born, okay, with blessings of certain things. Your physiology plays into your voice and stuff. But I will say that a lot of this can be trained. We don't give enough credence to music education from every level of education because it helps so much with brain processes. Like students, on average, who have access to consistent music education perform better on tests and math classes and other classes because of this. So I would like to see more, revitalization of music education and bringing some of these other types of approaches, which may be more fun and accessible to students who don't want to just like pick up a tuba and play in the orchestra or something of the traditional instruments that are offered in a lot of elementary schools, middle schools.
Right. Okay, so you're saying traditionally we'll think of it as someone has a natural, proclivity or predetermination to music. They can instantly pick up a guitar or piano and play a song and say, okay, you go into music.
Right.
Right, like you're a natural.
Yeah.
Like those are the people who go. But you're saying that no, you can teach this.
Yes, absolutely. I've seen it lots of times with people who came to me close to tone deaf with singing, couldn't even tell that they were singing in a different key than what they were playing or to match a note that they heard. And I know various processes to get a person in touch with that. And I've seen huge transformations in a number of people. But the biggest transformations that I've seen are in the emotional blockages. And people sometimes cry in the lessons just because they're like facing that. And they are like, oh, wow, this is hard for me. And then they realize what is really going on. And then when they break through that, all of a sudden, there's a freedom that comes and a heart in the voice that feels more dignified, courageous, present.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of power between the heart and the voice that gets lost, And when it's there, we feel more powerful.
Yeah, and the breathing is a huge part of it, too, because the breath is life. And when we breathe and we're panicky, it's a very short breath. It doesn't barely get into the lungs or especially not the abdomen. So a lot of people are doing breath work now, which is so excellent when it's done mindfully, but it gets you in touch with the deeper breathing process. And then the air has to pass through your heart. If it's coming up here, then I'm not really able to drop into the sound where it's vibrating this part of my body more forcefully. So breath work, singing, flute playing, those things relate the air to the heart, and then what comes out of you is passing from that deeper place.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you very much. I think you did hear with me what you set out to do. Like it feels more accessible, it feels more open, and I'm gonna give it a shot. We'll try some of this flute stuff and see how you do.
Amen.
Thanks so much.